Let's cross to the National Assembly and speak to France 24's Julia Kim, who's standing by for us. Julia, a very closely watched address to the Parliament. It was quite a rowdy session at times. What do you think the key messages were that the Prime Minister wanted to get across?
Absolutely, Tom. I mean, we heard the left-wing Nupes bloc particularly rowdy there, especially, as you mentioned, during that point about pension reform. They were also quite rowdy when she mentioned the green transition that she wants to essentially enact in France. But the main message really to come out of this speech was of compromise. She says that she's here essentially and that her three sort of credos are dialogue, compromise and openness, and she wants to make sure that all MPs receive that message. She talked about how essentially the three pillars, I suppose, of her policy roadmap: a full employment by 2027, this green transition that she wants to make happen in line as well with job creation and equal opportunities. Now, her speech is still going on, but during the beginnings of her speech, she talked about how she wants to build together without sacrificing values, sacrificing individual parties' identities. She's also promised a constitutional consultation process, rather, a tripartisan commission in order to essentially get these parties together to be able to decide bill by bill and to compromise and essentially decide on these bills together. Of course, whether or not this actually happens as seamlessly as she's laying out, it remains to be seen. But she has made overtures to all the parties, saying that she's willing to compromise on a range of issues. Now, let's talk about full employment, because she's made all sorts of promises here. She's saying that during the last 5 years, she really touted Emmanuel Macron's record, saying that France currently has the lowest unemployment record in 15 years and the lowest youth unemployment in 40 years. And that's thanks to reforms that were passed in the Labour Ministry during Macron's term. Now, she's also talked about dignity in work, really trying to get across the message to the French people that full employment is important in order to essentially assure the kinds of social benefits that France has enjoyed for many, many years. Now, she's also talked about the fact that the unemployment system in France and the benefit system is so complex, that the benefit system and the way that people get trained in France in order to be able to move on to these high-paying jobs are essentially managed by different authorities, and so it's really difficult to find a sort of common thread in order to make people essentially enjoy careers that are easy to come upon. She's saying that essentially we need to simplify this system. We need to replace possibly the Pôle emploi, which is the office that looks after unemployment benefits, and she's proposed changing this into a scheme called France Travail, France Work. Now, there have been already some online reactions to this particular scheme. People are saying that she sounds like a soft Thatcher and that essentially this isn't going to go down well with French people. After that, she talked about how French people needed to invest in themselves, invest in lifelong learning, lifelong training in order to move up the career ladder, in order to essentially assure themselves the sorts of jobs that they're entitled to. So she talked a lot about that, and then she touched on, of course, the need to reform the pension system in France, a particularly controversial issue, and the left-wing Nupes alliance have already said that they would oppose anything that the Macron government proposes, because they themselves have their own quite radical proposals for essentially maintaining or rather lowering the retirement age. So there was that. She also talked a lot about the environmental issues that France faces. She was talking about how France needs to invest heavily in nuclear and renewable energy, that this mix of nuclear and renewables will essentially ensure that France is less dependent on Russia and other European countries in the future. She talked a lot about European energy independence, and she also once again touted Emmanuel Macron's government in the last 5 years, saying that France France has one of the lowest energy inflation rates in the lowest energy inflation rate in the Eurozone, and that's all because of good management, essentially, by the previous government, and that she is going to do everything she can to ensure that French people don't suffer as other European neighbours and countries around the world are suffering at the moment. She said that because of measures that her government had put in place, French people avoided having to pay an extra 11 euros more at the pump. And she's saying that essentially that she's also introduced rather other measures. She's saying that she's going to introduce a rent ceiling in order to protect French renters from price hikes. And she's she's also proposed a lot of measures, essentially, to make sure that French people have affordable housing and that there will be more houses being built. She also mentioned food vouchers also available for people. And once again, she touched on making all of this happen through full employment. So that's some of the things that she's touched upon today, and she's going to expand on that, obviously, as in the days to come. She said that tomorrow she's going to go to the Council of Ministers in order to bring forth proposals on how to combat record inflation at the moment. So that's something to watch out for in the hours to come.
Yeah, and Julia, it was interesting listening to her. This word compromise was used over and over again, very much a buzzword today.